It is my great pleasure today to interview our next speaker, Robert Baer. Robert Baer is the Vice President and the co-founder of Spiritual Awakenings International. He has a master's degree in public administration and a PhD in business. Robert is a former police officer who served with the Santa Cruz Police Department and then the California Highway Patrol for 20 years, over 20 years. Robert currently works as a business consultant and a grant writer. Robert Baer is a multiple near-death experiencer and multiple STE experiencer. And it is my great pleasure today to interview Robert Baer. Robert.
Good morning, Yvonne, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
So, Robert, you have had two remarkable near-death experiences on the same day back in 2009. Can you tell us, did you have any premonitions or warnings before you had those two NDEs that day? Did you have any warning that you were going to die?
I did, and this started in 2008, at the end of 2008. I had a good friend that I'd been a policeman with back in the 60s and the 70s. We were both from the Santa Cruz area, and periodically he would call or I would call him, and we would catch up with one another. And you really know you have a good friend when you pick up the phone and you start talking, and it's like your conversation just continues from where you left off. But he had called me, and during our conversation, he made a comment. Robert, I feel compelled to ask you something. And I said, well, go ahead. What do you want to ask me? He says, are you right with the Lord? And I asked him, what did you ask that for? He says, I just felt compelled to ask it. I said, well, I think so. And then we continued with our conversation. And a short time later, I was in bed, and my mother had passed away in 2005. And I awoke at night, and at the foot of my bed was my mother.
Wow.
She was absolutely beautiful. She looked like she did when I was a young boy. And I saw her. I thought it was a dream, but I knew it wasn't a dream. And I don't know how we talked. I think it was telepathically, but she told me that I was going to die and to get my affairs in order. And it was so overwhelming. It even bothers me to talk about it today.
Mhm.
I was so upset at myself because she disappeared, and I wanted to tell her how much I loved her and missed her. And
Mm.
she left.
Mm.
And that haunted me for a couple of days. And in fact, I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. And I remember calling my father, who was still alive. Of course, he wanted to know if she asked about him. And I said, no. I said, this is what was said. But I said, she looked beautiful. She just absolutely beautiful. But she was all in white.
Mm.
And a little while, a few months later, my friend that I had talked to on the phone, he passed away from a stroke.
Mm.
And it was just, it was really a horrible thing to experience because we'd been friends for all those years. And I went down to California for his services, his celebration of life, and met everybody, and I took part in his eulogy. And all this time, I'd been thinking about what my mother had said. And I had a full physical where you have a treadmill and you have all your blood tests and urine tests. And I had passed with flying colors. So I kind of in the back of my mind, I thought, I'm in pretty good health. But short time after the celebration of life, just before I was getting ready to go to Arizona on a vacation, my friend showed up at the foot of my bed,
Wow, your deceased friend,
my deceased friend,
his
one that
spirit.
I had talked to
Hmm.
on the phone, and he looked like he did when we were young. And I looked at him, and the same thing. I wasn't sure whether it was a dream, but it wasn't a dream
Hmm.
because he spoke to me in the same way. I don't know whether it was telepathically. I understood everything he said, but he told me that he was going to bring me through the light
Wow.
and to not worry. And I mentioned, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I want to leave. I want to go see my grandchildren in Sacramento." Well, I was blown away again. I could not sleep. It was just, I mean, I was sweating, and this is the second time this had happened to me.
Hmm.
And I made a couple of phone calls because I wasn't sure where his grandchildren were. And I confirmed that they did live in Sacramento.
Wow.
So that kind of reinforced what he had told me. But those were my basically premonitions. And
Right. I would say
and
like two warnings that
yes,
something was going to happen.
yes, yes.
Wow. So why don't we move on, Robert? And people are dying to hear. So tell us what actually happened that day in 2009, the first near-death experience you had when you were boarding the airplane. So you had these two warnings, but you really weren't sure what they were talking about. And then you were boarding the plane in 2009. So please tell us what happened.
Well, I went to Arizona to visit my son and my my grandchildren, and it was during the spring training time, uh, where all the major league teams that are down there in Arizona, they have exhibition games and things like that. And I always went down in the springtime because my son was a high school football, baseball, basketball coach, and he would have like a spring break. So that's when I would go down there. And I'm from a coastal climate where it's relatively cool all the time. And in Arizona, it was miserable for me. It was probably in the 90s, maybe up to 100. I'm not sure, but going to all the games and stuff, I didn't feel good the whole week I was there. And quite frankly, as much as I love my son and my granddaughters, I was actually looking forward to getting back into the cooler weather. So it came time for me to catch my flight from Phoenix to back to Oregon. And my son dropped me off at the airport, and we said our goodbyes. And I went in the terminal, and there was this long TSA line. And I thought, I didn't feel good. And I thought, how am I going to make this? But I did. John Wayne it, made it through it. Didn't feel good. I stopped at a little convenience store that they have at the airport plaza there. I bought a couple of aspirins, which is probably a good thing I took them. And then I went over to the boarding area, and they finally called us to board to get into the airplane, to get onto the airplane. So I got on the airplane, and as I was putting things in the overhead bin, I dropped dead from a massive heart attack.
Oh my goodness.
I don't remember anything after that that had to do with my physical body. I was told, and my children had actually talked to a couple of firemen that were off duty from the Pacific Northwest that were on that flight, and it hadn't taken off yet. So we were just boarding. And there was also a doctor on the plane, from what I was told. And they started to do CPR on me, and I believe they worked a defibrillator on me.
Mhm.
I don't remember one thing about that.
Right. And you were clinically dead at this point. Is that not true?
That's correct.
How long do they figure you were clinically dead from this heart attack?
I was told about 45 minutes.
Wow. So you were clinically dead for about 45 minutes.
Yes.
So tell us what you experienced during those 45 minutes, Robert.
I ended up gravitating into a light,
Mhm.
and it was absolutely phenomenal. Somebody was with me, or something was with me, and I kind of think it would have been my friend that I talked
Mhm.
about, because if he told me he was going to do something, he would do it.
Right.
But I went up and gravitated, and I saw these magnificent colors that don't exist on Earth. Just absolutely phenomenal. And it was so warm and pleasing. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It was awesome in a way.
Mhm.
But I ended up in the presence of a higher power, and it was so humbling. I could not look at the higher power. It was just humbling. I knew that was the Almighty. I knew it. And I was surrounded by, I wouldn't say it was an auditorium, but it felt like one, they were like what appeared to be souls, but I don't know how to describe it.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was asked a question, and the question that I was something to the effect like, what good had I done in my life? I still could not look at the higher power, but over to my left, and I specifically remember my left, a life review started for me of my entire life from the time I was conceived, and I say conceived, until the time that I passed away. And it was a reckoning for me. Uh,
Tell us about it. What was it like? Was it like you were watching a movie, or was it like you were re-experiencing it? What was it like, your life review?
it could be maybe categorized as being like a movie, but I was in it and I could see myself. I sensed exactly what I thought at the time, but as I interacted with other people, for example, even animals, because I had cattle at one time in my life, I could sense their feelings and how they thought about me. And when you have a lot of power like I had in my life, whether it was being a policeman or a university professor, or I was a city manager, general manager, where you hire and fire people, and you deal with the public. I was a tribal administrator, had all these jobs, which, quite frankly, I dealt with people, and whether you fire or terminate somebody, or whatever interaction you had, I didn't realize how it affected their lives until I saw it play before me. And I did not like what I saw. And I'm not saying I'm a bad person, but I personally did not like what I saw.
Were you able to feel their perspectives too, how they felt?
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
I did. And everything, there's nothing but truth. That's all there is in this realm. There's nothing but truth. And as everything progressed, some of the things that I had done and some of the things I experienced, I had a really hard time once I came back to life to deal with some of the things I saw. For example, betrayal. It, very difficult for me um, to see things play out, to see maybe your friends or your work colleagues, what they actually thought of you or what actually happened.
Mhm.
And those of us that have had the experience of going through a divorce, which I had done, and I had a very tumultuous divorce. It was not something that was easy for either myself or my former spouse. Uh, I saw all that stuff play out, and I saw some betrayal.
Mhm.
And later on, I went ahead and found out, I confirmed the betrayal.
Mhm. Mhm.
But during my life review, something was like fidgeting off on the right. And I was trying to pay attention to the left, but something was fidgeting on the right. I momentarily looked to the right, and there was my dog Scooter
Oh
that
my goodness.
passed away in 2001, and she was so happy to see me, and she couldn't come to me. I don't know why, but
Mhm.
she just was just happy, wagging her tail, just kind of making sounds and making noises. And I was trying to pay attention to my life review and looking at her, and I thought, this is a wonderful place if your animals end up there. And
Awesome. I want to ask you about that. Were you surprised to see your dog Scooter in heaven? I mean, before this, did you think dogs went to heaven?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I actually believed in heaven.
Mhm.
Um, I had, when you become, especially, I'm not saying this of all people that are, for example, in law enforcement or maybe the military or maybe in any line of work, like you as a doctor, I don't know. Um, I just kind of spiritually, I wasn't that much into what I should have been paying attention to.
Mm.
Um, and it was an eye opener for me. It was a reckoning. And
Wow.
I'm just, if there's one thing that I can, if people can learn this one thing from me, from what I'm saying, and you know, I've said this before in different talks that I've had. Today, we're so used to having videos and we're so used to having pictures, whether it's digital or whatever, or even on our cell phones. Uh, my account is just what I saw, and in some place where there are no cell phones, there are no videos. It's my word as to what I saw happened. And whether you want to believe me or not, that's your choice. But this is no different than, and I've mentioned this, like Christopher Columbus or uh, Marco Polo or somebody like that that goes off and has an adventure, comes back and reports about what he had seen.
Hmm.
So it's my word, and those days it was their word about what actually transpired, and that's all I'm doing to the audience. Uh,
Right. Yeah, and we believe you, Robert. Absolutely. But let's get back to your life review. Now, you mentioned that there were a number of things that felt like a reckoning for you, that you realized maybe times you could have been kinder or times that others could have been kinder towards you. But did you also see some of the good that you had done in your life during your life review?
I did. Um, I know I had it was quite something that I didn't realize at the time, but like I did CPR on somebody that survived. Uh, I delivered a baby that was in
Hmm.
an accident. It's just it was really pretty simple. It's just she had had other children before, uh, and actually had she drove through a red light and broadsided a car. She was trying to drive herself to the hospital, and I was actually at a hamburger stand right where it happened. I was working and about to eat a hot dog, and I heard the crash, and I was with uh, another officer, and we both looked at each other and said, "Well, there goes lunch." And so we went over there, and she had told me that she couldn't wait; she was going to have a baby. So this was back around the in the 70s where they had like these bench seats in cars. And
Uh-huh.
she had a car that has a bench seat. So I told the other officer, I said, watch the traffic and call an ambulance and so on and so forth. And I said, I have to, I'm here. She's going to have a baby. And so she did. I mean, it was wonderful.
And so did you re-experience this in your life review?
I did. I did. And she was so appreciative that I calmed her down and everything. But it's something I never imagined I would ever have to experience.
Wow. Uh,
And but there were a lot of good things that happen, and there's some unusual things. You talked about Beverly yesterday, um, from San Diego Ions. It was just
mhm.
coincidental, but when we all first met, Yvonne, she
Yes.
started talking, and something triggered in my mind, and she was talking about her accident in Los Angeles. And all of a sudden, I realized I was the officer that worked her accident. And it's a small world when things like that happen.
Yeah.
It made me feel good to see how appreciative she was. And I don't know if you remember you were there when we were
Oh,
talking.
I do recall.
It was, and I know she told that to a lot of people because I was getting calls and about what Beverly was saying, but and God rest her soul, she was a sweet woman. But
Awesome. Yeah. So you did a lot of good, but the reckoning part for you was when you saw things in your life review where you felt you could have done better. Can you tell us maybe an incident or two in your life review that have really impacted you, that were life-changing for you?
I can tell you that I believe in karma.
Mm.
I was I was a high school freshman and I was very good at sports, and I made the varsity baseball team as a freshman, which was kind of unusual to have happen. But after practice one day, we were all taking showers, and I was taking a shower, and one of the players, who I think he may have been jealous, and I got that from the life review aspect. He grabbed me, pulled me out of the shower, caught me totally off guard. And the boys' locker room was in one building, the girls' locker room was in another building, and there was a swimming pool in between them. And the girls' swimming team was actually practicing. Well, he threw me out naked into the swimming pool area and locked the door, and I could hear him laughing and stuff. And the swim coach, she came over and gave me a towel, and it was very embarrassing for me. One of the last things I did for the California Highway Patrol, I was getting ready to wrap up my career, and I was cleaning up everything, and I decided to take a drive one more time on the in a highway patrol cruiser. And it was about 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. I'm going down the freeway, and I see this car that was serpentine, and I thought, oh, this guy must be driving under the influence. So I called in a bit. I was the watch commander, a shift supervisor. So I called an adjacent beat unit to meet me. I said I was going to stop a possible drunk driver, and they did not want the shift supervisors to be tied up uh, in case an emergency happened where you had to respond to it. But I pulled the car over, walked up, and the window had been rolled down. I could just smell the alcohol coming out of the car. And I asked the driver for his driver's license and registration, and I thought this guy looks familiar. That was the guy that had thrown me out into the girls' uh, where they were practicing at swimming. Uh, I saw that, and I thought, thank you, Jesus. This has been here it is. Here's somebody that that had done this to me, and it's karma. I mean, the unit came up, the other highway patrol unit came up, and I told them, I said, I'm going to do this one myself. So I arrested the guy and put him in the car. And I never said who I was, didn't let on to anything. I treated him like I would have done with anybody else. But he was in the car, he was crying and saying his wife was going to leave him because of this. And I thought to myself, this is karma. And
Huh.
karma, I could tell other stories about it that I saw in my life review, but karma is something that is real.
Wow.
I'm convinced of it.
Wow. So the life review helped you realize that karma is absolutely real. That's phenomenal. I want to ask you one more thing about the life review before we move on. You mentioned and you made a point of it of saying that your life review started with conception. Tell us about that.
Well, I was telling this to my father. My father was still alive at the time, and I was telling him about the life review, and I told him that I saw this vision of him and my mother um, by this old Chevrolet, and he goes, "Old Chevrolet," and I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know it's a Chevrolet," and I said, "I pay attention to those things because of all those years I was a policeman. You just pay attention to makes of cars and so on and so forth." And he says, "Well, what did your mom have on?" And I said, "Well, she had like a plaid skirt and a sweater." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yes." So he left for a few moments and went to a closet, and he was rummaging through the closet, and he showed me a picture of him and my mother in front of a Chevrolet, and she was wearing a plaid skirt and had a sweater, and they were both smiling. He says, "Is this what you saw?" And I said, "Yes, it is. That's exactly what I saw." And he said, "This was one of the best days of your mother's life." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "On this day, just as this picture was taken, we had found out that she was pregnant with you, and then we went down and got married." I said, "You mean I'm a love child?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, your mom would kill me if I ever took, because they always told me it was like they met a year earlier. But but he confirmed what I had saw. So
Wow.
it was that's just one example.
Very phenomenal. So you were dead for 45 minutes, and then you say you were resuscitated, and then you had another and different near-death experience later in the hospital. Could you tell us about that second near-death experience?
Yes. I had been in an emergency room, and they had revived me. And I don't know, I had a doctor from Pakistan that would this man would not let me die. Um, and I was revived, and a short time later I passed away again. But this was a total different experience where I was hovering over the bed that my body was on, and I was watching everybody work on me. Someone had said he's gone again, and I even saw the flat line on the monitor. I knew what that meant. I was watching them, and then all of a sudden my attention was diverted to another part of the hospital or another room, and a couple of people in admissions were going through my items that came in on the ambulance, and they were trying to figure out who the hell I was, I think. So I heard them mention something about insurance cards. So I was trying to tell them where I kept my insurance cards. And a lot of policemen have two wallets. We have one that has our badge and ID in it, and another one that has like all your regular stuff, like social security card and your driver's license and things of that nature, credit cards, things of that nature. And I was trying to tell them that the insurance cards were in the wallet that had my police ID in it.
Mhm.
And I was trying to tell them that, and I realized they can't hear me. And I thought, I must be dead.
Mhm.
And and finally, one of them opened the wallet that had my badge, and they, oh my goodness, this guy's a retired police. They saw everything. And just a few moments after that, after I heard that, I was revived again,
Hmm.
and I ended up on the hospital gurney or bed or whatever you want to call it. They
And
revived
how long did they think you were dead that time?
about 10 minutes, I was told.
Okay. Hmm.
And I ended up in an intensive care unit for cardiac patients. Yvonne, I had so many machines hooked up to me. It was just, it was unbelievable. It was very uncomfortable. And I had this thing in my mouth that they had put down my throat. And it was just really, really bothering me. Um, but I had a goal to stay alive if I could until I saw my children.
Oh,
And it was it was a few days later that they took the thing out of my throat. Um, and I could, oh, it was such a great feeling. And the doctor, he kept coming in and talking to me all the time. And just a great guy. And he said, do you remember anything of what happened when you had expired? And he actually used the term coded out.
mm,
And I said, yeah, I do. And I said, I remember something that happened here. And I told him about seeing the people going through my personal things and my wallet he goes, really? And I said, yes. So he went and found out who those two people were, and he brought them back to where I was in the intensive care ward. And he said, can you tell them what you told me? And I said, yeah. And I told them what I had seen. And they said, that's exactly what happened, word for
wow.
word. So that confirmed to me what I had saw when I was deceased. So, um, and I had, and I never would have known this until I met you, Yvonne. I had two near-death experiences on the same day, but they were totally opposite. And I always thought a near-death experience probably was the gravitating into the light in the life review. That's how much of a novice I was about these terms and all the things that go with spiritually transformative experiences. So,
So you didn't realize the out of body experience was a
no.
second near death experience at first.
And
Uh-huh.
and and I had never seen a video. I had never seen a talk. I had never seen a movie. I was somebody that was not familiar with things that happen in a situation like I was in,
Wow.
and my eyes were opened. Uh,
Yeah, that
and
was going to be my next question is how did it impact you? How did it change you having these two near death experiences that day?
well, my life hasn't been the same. I
Mhm.
I'm not that person that I was before that, and I'm saying that in a good way. I don't think I was
Mhm.
a bad person, but I have chose to go a different route. Spiritual Awakenings International is an example.
Mhm.
Um, and talking, and I've done numerous talks all over. Um, and I just I just decided that I wanted to be someone that if I ever have to go through a life review again, which I think I will, I won't have to see the same thing that I saw before. And I live every day like it's my last day. I try to treat everybody fairly and respectfully. And I've made amends to some of the people that maybe I saw in my life review that I was out of line with. If I'm able to do that, I'll sneak it into a conversation and bring it up. I substantiated numerous things. And the one with the betrayal, uh, I had it's actually an unfortunate experience of, I have a daughter who's an attorney who has had cancer issues, and she had to have a surgery. And I went up to the hospital to be there for her surgery. I was in the waiting room, and her mother was there,
Mhm.
and we hadn't spoke or talked to each other in years. And we were sitting in the room together, hadn't talked, and her now husband, she got remarried, was just glaring at me the whole time. And finally he got up and went to the restroom or did something. And I looked at my former wife and I said, you know what happened to me? And she goes, yeah, I do. And I said, we have a daughter that may need both her dad and her mom. And I said, why don't we just bury the hatchet and whatever happened, happened, and just move on and be adults about this. And she thought about it for a second and she said, okay. I said, I have one caveat. She goes, well, what's that? And I mentioned something that I saw in my life review regarding betrayal and her. And I said, this is just something I like to know whether it actually happened. I'm not going to say anything. In my mind, I just wanted to confirm that what I saw was accurate. And she confirmed it.
Wow.
That's
So you
another.
had, yeah, you had more than one confirmation of things that you saw in your life review. That's pretty phenomenal. So, uh, many people after their near-death experiences, they find themselves more open to other sort of STEs or mediumship experiences. Did any of that happen to you? Did you notice after effects from your near-death experiences?
Ab- Absolutely. There was a time, it doesn't happen as often as it did, but I mean, I've been alive an extra 5,922 days. I count them every day. And
And we're
um,
glad you're here, Robert.
it's a total blessing. And at first, I would set off alarms like in stores. TSA, I couldn't go through a line without setting everything off. Microwaves,
Uh, the electromagnetic sensitivity
yeah.
syndrome, you had that.
And I was interviewed for one particular, in fact, it was my first or second one. It was on Skype,
Mhm.
uh, and I blew out the screen. Uh, they couldn't see me. It was all, and it was my electronic. We had to do it another way, but I had things like that happen, and I also changed my perspective on a lot of things. For example, reincarnation.
Right.
I it's my whole perspective on that has changed, and I never would have thought that. And I grew up in an Irish Catholic household, so things like that were not discussed. It
Hmm.
was it was an eye opener to me. It was.
Hmm. 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 And have you had another NDE more recently after these ones?
I did. Um, and this was another type of an NDE that um, I wouldn't have known until I met Yvonne Kason. But um, I had had a bleeding ulcer issue from some of the medications that I was taking. And In fact, I almost bled out. I had to go to emergency room. And while I was being treated, I happened to see off to my left again uh, the the figure of someone that was, it may have been a deceased relative. I don't know. Uh, I never knew my grandfathers. They both died before I was born. Was somebody like that. It was like right alongside where I was being treated and stuff. And I think that
So,
was a near-death experience.
yeah, so it was like a vision of a departed spirit
Yes,
while you were close to death. Yes, yes, absolutely. Wow. So Robert, what sorts of STEs are you having now? Are you continuing to have different types of STEs?
I do. Um, I have it's just a wonderful experience to sense when I'm going to have an opportunity to see those colors again. Sometimes it happens when it's real quiet.
Mhm,
And if I sense it's going to happen, it's usually at night.
mhm,
Um, I'll just sit, turn off all the lights, drink a soda or an alcoholic beverage, and just watch the colors. And I've become enamored with colors. If you see my background, uh, I just love light and different colors. But the ones I see when I'm having these types of experiences, they don't exist on Earth.
mhm.
They're different colors, and I don't know how to explain it. And I've been very blessed because I've been told by other people that have experienced what I have, they experience the same perception of the colors, or it's like a different realm.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's very awesome.
Wow.
The other thing is when I was a little boy, I used to have these vivid dreams, and they were nightmares where I would wake up and I was in an airplane that was on fire and I was going down, and my mother would come in and she'd say, "What's the matter?" And I would tell her about this dream, and like they're going to crash. And my father was a World War II veteran, and we went to a place called Moffett Field in the Silicon Valley. This goes back in the early 50s. And we were looking at all these different planes that they had on display there. And there was a Messerschmitt there, a German plane. And my dad would put me on the wing so I could look in the cockpit. And I remember looking in the cockpit of the Messerschmitt, and I told my father, I said, "That's what I see in my dream." And he goes,
Wow.
"What are you talking about?" He says, "Yeah, that's what every time I have," and I was still having those nightmares.
Mhm,
And after I passed away and was rehabbing, one of the things the cardiologist asked me to do was to start walking. And I would go to a track, and he said, try and walk half a lap, then you go to a full lap, then half a mile, and so on and so forth. And I was up to 2 miles, and I was there at twilight one night, and my dog Harley was with me, and we were walking, and all of a sudden Harley went to the ground. He just stopped, and I thought, what's going on here? And in the middle of the track was a football field with grass and goalposts on each end. I happened to look over there and I had a vision. And the vision I had were airplanes, and I looked at them closely, and they were German airplanes, World War II vintage, and I saw some pilots, German pilots, Luftwaffe, walking towards the planes. I think I was one of those.
Mhm.
I watched that and I finally it disappeared. But that's one of the reasons I believe in reincarnation, um, where I didn't do it before. And I've had other instances too where that's kind of triggered something to that effect.
Mhm.
But this has been a phenomenal experience to recover and to change perceptions, change my lifestyle, um, my relationships. I could not tell my police friends what happened.
I imagine you couldn't.
They,
Yeah.
they would have thought I was crazy. However, now I'm getting calls from them. They see me on television or they'll see me on YouTube or somebody will tell them about me. And I went down for a reunion, which is the first one I'd ever gone to. And everybody there, because I just didn't want to talk about what had happened. I thought they would think I was crazy.
Hmm.
On the contrary, it was very, very touching how I was treated and the interest, especially as we're getting older and
Hmm.
getting used to you're at the end of the line.
Hmm.
A lot of times you start thinking about that.
And
And
and this was the other police officers, was it? Other former police officers?
and and one of the reasons that I started talking, I was on YouTube actually watching a sports recap, and on the sidebar in YouTube they have these little like teaser videos where you can see what else they recommend or whatever. And I saw one that had to do with George Harrison. Um, and I saw the last Beatle concert in 1966 in Candlestick Park. I was a big Beatles fan when I was
Lucky
younger.
you.
And
Lucky you.
and I clicked on that, and here was George Harrison. It was his last interview, and I've talked about this before, but it had a real impression on me. He was talking about how he worried about what's going to happen to him when he died. He
Mhm.
had fame, he had wealth, he had women, all these different things. And he said he wished he would have thought about the consequences of his actions before he got to the point where he was about ready to check out. And that had a profound effect on me. Um, I saw that and I thought, he's right. And
Mhm.
if you want to see the video, it's just Google um, George Harrison's last interview.
Mhm.
It's there.
So it resonated with what you learned from your life review. I want to get back to a couple more of the after effects, if I could, of your having had now multiple near-death experiences. You've told me you've also had various mediumistic experiences. Can you
I
share
have.
a little bit about that, please?
I have, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know how to stop it either.
Mhm.
Um, you can ignore things for only so long. I'll give you an example. I was in a Walmart standing in line, and somebody ahead of me didn't have enough money to pay for her groceries. So I've done this a lot since this. I asked how much she was short, and the clerk told me. So I just took my ATM card, stuck it in there, and this lady was very happy. She says, "Well, thank you so much." And and I looked at her and I said, "You're welcome." But I said, "Did you just paint a room in your house Chinese dragon red?" And she goes, "Well, how did you know?" And it just flashed on me. I get these flashes. And Spiritual Awakenings International was created by you and I with downloads from Spirit.
Mhm.
We created this with downloads.
Mhm.
And I get the same thing when I have it's like when I have medium type tendencies, it's like a download.
Mhm.
And I never should have said anything to that lady because not only did she follow me out to my car, but so did a couple other people. They wanted to know how I knew, and I said, I'm so sorry I even said that. And so things like that happen.
Mhm.
And
And
before this,
sometimes you see stuck souls too, don't you, Robert? I had an experience once with you where we both were seeing stuck souls.
yes, that's true. That's true. And I wanted to know, I know time's running out here. I wanted to talk about something that I've been lecturing about, not lecturing, but talking about.
Your angel encounters, that was going to be my next question. Please
Uh,
tell us about one of your angel encounters. I know you feel very, very moved by them starting to happen to you.
well, I actually saw some in my life review, and the one I want to bring up is one that I mentioned to you once before. I talked to one group and I brought it up and it generated and triggered a lot of questions. But um, I had started to live in Texas and I was still working at Oregon Tech at the time. I had a faculty staff job there, and I would fly from Oregon to Texas on the weekends, and had this one flight. I had to take a connector flight, so it flew to Denver and then went from Denver to Houston, and it was a red eye. So I got on the flight, and usually on red eye flights, it's not uncommon to see people just want to sleep, and they had pillows and stuff like that people could use to sleep. And I was in an aisle seat. There was no one seated next to me, and then there was somebody at the window seat. And I thought that person was sleeping. I didn't want to bother anybody. So, and this goes back in the 90s. I was a totally different person at that time. So we were getting ready to land, and all of a sudden, the guy that was sitting along the window seat looks at me, and he had these piercing eyes. I remember that. And he says, "Do you read the Bible?" And I said, "Well, it's an unusual question to ask somebody." He says, "Well, do you?" And I said, I try to. He says, "Well, read Matthew 18:18." And I thought, what's this all about? So we landed, and I kept thinking about this. I got my stuff, and I got off the plane, and there's the area where you like the boarding desk and places like that. And there were people waiting to get on on the on another plane or whatever. And I thought, I'm going to ask this guy about that, why he asked me that. So I waited and waited and waited. He never showed up. So I asked somebody, I said, from the airline, I said, is this a connector flight to someplace else? And they said, no, this is the final destination. I said, well, did everybody get off the plane? And they said, yeah, it's everybody's off. So I thought, well, how did I miss this? So I went, I went home and it was Sunday, and I thought, well, I didn't read the Matthew 18:18. I thought, well, Sunday, I think I'm going to go to church today. And somebody had told me about this church. It was a black church that had this great music, like Motown type thing. So I thought, I'm in for that today. So I drove there, and I got in there as the only white person in that church. Not that that makes a difference, but I probably stood out a little bit. And I was in the very back row, and the pastor got up and he goes, I was set today to give a sermon on such and such. He says, I was shaving today, and all of a sudden I got this revelation to speak about Matthew 18:18. My God, what's happening here? And so he gave a brilliant sermon. And at the end of church, he liked to go out to the door and thank everybody for coming in and have them invite them to a potluck that was in another part of the church. So I I ended up being the last person. I wanted to be the last person. And I stopped and I told him, I said, I told him a story about being on the plane and about somebody mentioning Matthew 18:18. He just started to cry. And he goes, "Who are you?" I says, "I'm just an average white man. That's all I am." But I said, "Thank you for your message." I said, it must have been for me. He goes, "That message was for you." And that was an angel.
What is the message of Matthew 18:18?
It's basically, I got out of it, it's protection.
Mm.
Angels for protection.
Oh, isn't
And
that beautiful?
it was what an experience that was. I mean, and I've had other things happen, and my next talks that I'm going to uh, start talking about will be on angel encounters. I did 6 different talks for some some ministries down in Buenos Aires and Dallas, Texas. So that's the next thing I'm going to talk about is that.
Angel encounters. That is absolutely phenomenal, Robert. I want to ask you one more question before we go to the question and answer portion for people from the audience. And if you have questions for Robert, please put them in the chat. So just to sort of summarize with all of these near-death experiences, STEs, visions, all of these things that you're having now, Robert, what would be your one um, biggest message that you would like to convey to everybody that you've learned through having all these spiritual experiences?
What we do in our lives on earth matters.
Mhm.
You don't really realize, and you may not realize it at the time, but it may have tentacles or it reaches out and it goes off um, in different directions. But
Mhm.
what I what I said before, I live every day like it's my last day. Everything is small stuff now.
Mhm.
I mean, you get a you get a ticket by the police, small stuff.
Mhm.
There's no sense in worrying about stuff like that. It's out of your control. But if I try to have that perspective and I try to do good,
Mhm.
one of the things I do, I write grants for nonprofits and homeless shelters and disabled veterans, and my whole work focused, except I have one project now uh, that's a huge project, but other than that, I'm still working. And if I can help um, make a difference in people's lives, I try to do that. And
Awesome.
I think even Yvonne, even Spiritual Awakenings International, I think we've done something great for the world. I really do. That's why
Mhm.
we're in 107 countries. That's why we
Mhm.
have 1,300 or whatever it is people sign up for our conference.
Yeah.
It's it's about doing good and
Yeah.
reaching out and helping people.
That's a wonderful, wonderful message. Thank you, Robert. I'm
Sure.
now going to ask you a few questions people from the audience have been posing, and I'm going to start with a question from Anne. And Anne would like to know, Robert, what do you believe now about God and heaven?
There is a higher power. I was in front of the higher power. I didn't have, in fact, it still bothers me to talk about it. It's so humbling. I could not even look at the higher power, but it's all truth. That's all there is truth. When you go to that realm, it's truth.
Mhm.
And it's It's a reality to me.
Mhm,
And heaven is real. I believe it.
mhm. Thank you, Robert. Nancy has a question. She says, what do you think now about reincarnation and past lives?
I believe in reincarnation. I believe in past lives. I um I love hearing people that talk about that. For example, for SAI, I enjoy hearing talks and discussions about it and different perspectives. Later on today, Mark Anthony is going to talk. I love listening to him talk about reincarnation, for an example. And I would welcome and encourage everybody to hear him talk.
Mhm.
Um, it has piqued my interest. And after seeing what I have seen, and I have other examples that I don't have time to get into, but I believe it's a real thing.
Awesome. Philip would like to know, did you come back feeling like you were given a second chance in some way?
I don't think you can experience what I did and not feel that way. Um, I don't remember getting a message to as I was coming back. Maybe I was, I don't know. I don't remember it. I vividly remember being in the life review and what I've explained to everybody, but I just decided to make some drastic changes in my life and in my relationships. And so it was on me. It was self-realization.
Mhm,
I'll put it that way.
mhm.
You know what I'm talking about, Yvonne.
Awesome. So Bethany has a question for you, Robert. Bethany would like to know, do you do anything with your art now that you've had these near-death experiences with all those colors?
I actually am, and I've kind of gotten away from it since COVID, but I used to go around and photograph um, all different types of things in all parts of the world. And I started to enter contests, and I was lucky. I had a couple of things that National Geographic picked up. But I love photography. I love to do things that have to do with nature and colors. Like I'm very lucky. My daughter lives in Alaska, so I could go up there and see the Northern Lights periodically if I want to. Um, and yeah, that's about the best I can answer that.
So photography is how you're doing it.
Yes.
Awesome. So we have another question from Bethany. She says, Robert, you seem to have integrated your NDEs very well. Can you share anything that you've done that was particularly helpful in integrating your NDEs and helping you manage your after effects?
Probably the thing that has helped me integrate the after effects. I'm looking at her right now, Yvonne Kason, Dr. Yvonne Kason. And I would even put Dr. Brian Sackett in there too, because we both came from different places to get to Spiritual Awakenings International. And Brian knows what I'm talking about. But my whole life has changed since I've met you, Yvonne, and other people along the way. And you all, everybody that's involved with Spiritual Awakenings International, you've all been instrumental in that. And my mind is totally open. I thoroughly enjoy listening to everybody that makes a presentation. And I think I learned from just about everyone. So thank you, Yvonne.
I'm glad to know I had a positive effect, Robert. Um, so we have a similar question from Christy who says, how were you able to cope and integrate the NDEs considering your religious upbringing was very, very different? from what you experienced during your NDEs?
You know, I, I think I've always believed in a higher power. Um, when you experience when you experience the effects of a higher power, I don't know how you can come back and not have that affect your life. Um, it is so powerful, and it's been influential in the things that I do, and maybe even what I say. But I'm just not the same. It's just, and my children will tell you that they like the new Robert as opposed to the old Robert, even though I'm their father. Um, and
In what ways do your children say you've changed?
I'm not as rigid. I'm not as structured. I'm not as black and white. Um, and that just comes with what I did for a living. Um, you stop somebody and you hear all these stories. For example, uh, I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that, and you saw it, you saw that, or maybe you have it on your radar screen. Well, here, this is what the radar said. It's just like you become calloused and black and white. And when you do something for 23 years, that happens. So I'm not that person anymore. I'm not.
All righty. Lynn would like to know, when you were in the white light realm, did it feel like you were home? Did you feel it was a place of unconditional love? Did you feel love from the higher power?
I did. It was it was magnificent, and it was warm, and I can understand why people don't want to come back. Um, because I've heard people say that they didn't want to come back. Um, it's a it's a marvelous experience. Um, I just I don't know how much time I have left on Earth, but to know that that is some realm that I'll be going to, or that we all go to, um, in a way, it's something to look forward to. But we still have things to do here on Earth, especially with Spiritual Awakenings International. So
Our assignment, our joint assignment. BE has a question for you, and I think we'll just have one more question after this. Did the NDE seem long to you? Did it seem like it lasted a long time? That's part of the question. And did you come out of it thinking that you did much more bad than you did good in your life?
where I was, there was no conception of time. I have no idea how to answer that question. Um, did I feel I did bad? Um, I did some things that I regret. Some things that I regret have to do with how it affected people's lives. Um, maybe I wasn't as compassionate as I should have been, and that bothered me. That's why I've sometimes I've gone around and I've done my best to make amends or apologize uh, in an appropriate manner. Um, it it's just something that I've focused on doing, and if I have an opportunity to do it, I will do it. I'll tell people how I feel. So,
Good. So for our last question, this is also from BE, is wondering, did you meet Jesus in any of your NDEs, or was it God that you met?
I have been asked this question so many times. I believe in Jesus. Um, the higher power, I was so humbled I couldn't look at the higher power. I have no idea, e- except I know that the higher power exists, and it is humbling. You are put, your life is put on display. And when I said I was asked what I thought I was asked was what good had I done in my life? I think I focused on that when I watched the my life review, and I came back with that. And now I think about that all the time when I interact with people or when I do things. Um, what good have I done?
Mhm.
We all have an opportunity to make a difference in life. Everybody. I don't care what you do for a living or um, where you live or what your racial background is or whatever. We all have the ability to make a difference in lives, and I just like to treat people with dignity and with respect, and and just leave it at that.
Mhm.
And if they accept uh, my interaction with them, that's great. If they don't, I tried. So that's how I look at it. And it's been
Awesome.
very successful in business.
Mhm.
What I've done, especially now, one of the projects I'm on right now, it's a phenomenal project, and um, I couldn't see me doing this um, before I had my NDE. It takes that much to bring some of these parties together.
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
And I know this is the last question, but I want to thank everybody that uh, was here for our question and answer period. Thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And we got a great schedule of events today. Thank you for your time today.
Awesome. And thank you, Robert, for an absolutely beautiful interview and beautiful sharing about your near-death experiences, STEs, after effects, lessons you've learned, all of the above. So thank you, Robert. You hit it out of the ballpark.
Thank you.